There are people throughout the world that have interesting stories to tell. Stories of heroism, acts of kindness, near-death experiences, successes, and failures. You usually hear of these stories from people that live in another state or country. But what about the stories from within your own community? Everyone has a story to tell. And by everyone, we mean your neighbor, your coworker, the person behind you at church, people you interact with on a daily basis, or maybe even you.
Welcome to Season 2 of the DTB Podcast, presented by the Bless Your Heart Nonprofit Corporation. I'm Brennan Matherne, and I'll be your host as we speak to some of the most interesting people in Bayou Lafourche. We're so happy to be back with you for a second season. We welcome all of our new subscribers and encourage you to go check out our previous episodes. When we recorded our last episode of Season 1, it was mid-August of 2021, and we decided to take a little break after 13 episodes. Little did we know that 2 weeks later, we'd be facing the biggest natural disaster any of us had ever experienced. On August 29th, Hurricane Ida, at a Category 4, made landfall in Lafourche Parish. It was the strongest storm to ever hit southeast Louisiana and the 7th strongest storm to hit the United States. But you didn't think that would keep a bunch of Cajuns down, right? These past few months have been tough, but there is still a long road to recovery with signs of storms still everywhere in South Lafourche. But there are glimmers of hope as well. Residents are getting back on their feet, restaurants are reopening, and we're seeing new businesses come into the area. Bless Your Heart Nonprofit also remains extremely active in the recovery process, and we even recorded a bonus episode between the two seasons that detailed those endeavors, which you can go check out. But no one will forget the storm that forever changed our lives. Looking back at our first season, every guest who was alive in 1965 had a story about Hurricane Betsy. I think as we go through Season 2, we'll find everyone has a story about Hurricane Ida, which drew so many comparisons to Betsy. That brings us to our first show of Season 2. One of the lasting images of Hurricane Ida is the video of pieces of the roof flying off Lady of the Sea General Hospital in Cutoff. What some don't realize is there was actually people in that building at that time. Today, we'll talk to some of those people who were there while also discussing the history, current status, and the future of this important cornerstone of our community. Joining us from Lady of the Sea General Hospital are its CEO, Ms. Karen Collins, Lloyd Guidry Jr., the Chief Operations Officer, and Mr. Tad Lafont, Chief Clinic Officer. Everyone, welcome and thanks for joining the show.
Thank you very much.
So let's first of all go around the room, introduce yourself. We like to start off with tell us who your mom and dad is. Tell us about your family and where you grew up. Ms. Karen?
My name is Karen Collins. My mom was Joyce Hebert Semino. My dad, James Semino, was a Yankee. He was from Metairie, but he was in the Coast Guard, and my mom met him actually when he was stationed on Grand Isle, and came down here, got married, 7 kids. So we were, of course, raised here. I went to Baton Rouge to go to nursing school, lived there for a while, but then came home in 1982 and have been here ever since. Been at the hospital in various roles. The last being I was the chief nursing officer for 18 years and have been the CEO since 2013.
Lloyd?
My name's Lloyd Guidry Jr. My dad is Lloyd Guidry Sr., of course. He's a longtime educator in this area. He was a teacher and retired as a principal of South Lafourche High School after 40 years in the system. My mother's Dorothy Vizier Guidry, Dot, and she was also in the education system. She worked as a para at Golden Meadow Lower Elementary for several years. I grew up on West 202 Street, which is next to where Colley's Barbershop is, and where they used to have Lanny's Motel and a ballroom and stuff around there. So that's the area that I grew up in. I've been at the hospital almost 30 years. I'm a pharmacist by trade, so I direct the pharmacy in addition to Chief Operations Officer there. And I've been Chief Operations Officer since 2006.
So this is the DTB Podcast, and so we talk about being from down the bayou. Mr. Lloyd's from way down the bayou in the 200s on the west side. Tad?
Yeah, my name is Tad Lafont. I'm the Chief Clinic Officer at Lady Sea General Hospital. My dad is Larry Lafont, originally from La Rose, and my mom is Gail Martin Lafont, originally from Golden Meadow. I have one sister. Her name's Laurie. She lives out in Austin with her family. Married to Buffy Jeremy Lafont. And both of us have been at Lady C Hospital for quite a long time. I believe Buffy started in 1991, and I started in 1993. I've served in numerous roles at the hospital. I started as a nursing assistant, then I was an LPN. I was a registered nurse. I worked in the emergency room and managed the ICU for many years. And in 2010 or 11, I was given the role of chief clinic officer, where I'm responsible for the daily operations of all of our outpatient clinics. So Lady C Medical Clinic La Rose, Lady C Medical Clinic Cutoff, and our outpatient therapy department.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being here. Obviously, one of the key reasons we wanted to bring you on is so that we can inform the community about what's going on with the hospital since Hurricane Ida, and talk about where we're going to go in the future, the near and far off in the distance. But before we get into that and your experience during the storm, Ms. Karen, can you give us a little bit of the history of Lady of the Sea Hospital and Lloyd? I know that we were talking about this and researching it. There's not a lot online about the hospital. I'm sure it's all written down somewhere, but we'd love to hear a little bit about how the hospital got started, and especially how the name came about, things like that.
Well, the hospital was formed as a hospital service district back in 1953. And then they built a hospital in 1956, which many people won't remember because it's no longer there. It was where our current dialysis unit is. Following that, the hospital built the current building that we're in 1978. And it was licensed for 55 beds, and we have been there since then. I actually have to give away my age and say I was a candy striper at the first hospital, the original hospital.
Okay, well, some of us don't know what a candy striper is, so that is dating you a little bit. So explain what that is.
So this was when we were students in high school. You could come in and volunteer. So it was a volunteer group for young people. So if they were interested in healthcare-related fields, they could do some work and be able to see nurses and physicians at work.
And the outfit they wore looked like a candy cane. So I think that's why they were called candy stripers.
It was pink and white.
Pink and white.
That's fantastic. So the name, Lady of the Sea, it feels like it's right at home. It feels like such a good name, and it fits well. But how did that name come about?
Well, there was a contest when the hospital was first formed. There was a contest to name the hospital at the local schools. And so the hospital board at that time chose from the recommendations that were given in the community. And it makes sense when you think about it. Back then especially, we had such a lot of industry based on fishing and trawling that I could see how the Lady of the Sea would have won out as a nomination.
For sure. So, but you mentioned that it was originally built with 55 beds, and I'm sure over the years, y'all, there's been reconstruction, you move things around. Pre-Ida, what was the capacity of the hospital?
We had switched to a different status from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid to what is known as a critical access hospital. So we only had 25 beds. It just changes the way reimbursement happens for hospitals like that. So we only had 25.
Okay. So leading up to that, we come to the storm. Obviously, all of us stayed here for the storm. Phone lines go down, internet goes down. We're not seeing a lot. But during the storm, for those of us who did have internet access, and for all those who evacuated, we saw the video. We saw the roof being blown off, the person taking the video, reacting to it, and it quickly went viral, and it was on seemingly every newscast around the country. I know Ms. Karen, Mr. Lloyd, y'all were actually in the hospital at the time. Can you tell us what it was like being there? Maybe let's go back a little bit to the evacuation process, as the parish president calls the evacuation, and what y'all are faced with, the decisions that y'all have to make as a hospital, and how did that affect care leading up to the storm hitting?
Well, we have a very detailed hurricane plan because we are all every year involved in some type of hurricane preparation. We normally would evacuate patients when we have a storm of this intensity coming, but if you remember last August, we were in the very heights of our fifth COVID surge, our fourth COVID surge then. And so it was almost impossible to transfer patients. I mean, we called probably over 30 hospitals to try to transfer our 4 patients, and we weren't able to do so. And so we hunkered down, made sure they were going to stay safe during the storm, and we brought in the necessary staff to take care of them. We didn't get to see the video till much later, but we heard it and saw. We heard the roof and we saw the roof being blown all around us.
And we need to keep in mind how quick this thing developed, because it was a tropical storm and it was heading towards Mexico, and before you know it, it's a Cat 4 within 72 hours, I believe. So we had to make a lot of decisions in a quick amount of time. We did see some things happening. We thought the roof had blown off, but it really wasn't the roof. It was just the underside of the emergency room ramp. And then our big generator went out, which was capable of running the whole hospital. So once that thing went out, we had our facilities manager was looking into that. And I went to check on him, and he's running back the opposite way. And I said, "What about the generator?" He said, "That's the least of our worries right now, because the roof just blew off." So that's how quickly things happen.
Can you kind of set the scene for us, what it was like inside the hospital after, in the moments after that, and did y'all have patients on the 3rd floor? Like, what had to happen at that point?
Yeah, our patients were all on the 2nd floor. Is where we housed the patients. The 3rd floor, we did have staff up there, so we brought them down as a precaution to make sure they were safe. when the covering of the roof went off, it pulled pipe. Everything that was covering the roof went off with it. Actually, after the storm, when we walked up there, it's like someone would have scraped everything off of it. There were just holes where everything had been. And so almost immediately we started getting water coming in through the openings on the roof as it just slowly went through soaked tiles all the way through. They made sure the patients, of course, it didn't happen immediately. It took time. They made sure the patients were safe. We were on emergency power, even though we had our big generator failed. We have a second backup generator, so we're able to keep the patients, all the necessary functions for them working. We actually had the levee district we housed them during storms, so they were there and were willing to help us if we needed any help during that episode.
Yeah, things got progressively worse as the time went on. When the roof first came off, we didn't get inundated with rainwater right at the beginning, but as the night went on and things started to, come from the 3rd floor down to the 2nd floor and down to the 1st floor, we eventually had what looked like waterfalls coming through straight from the roof. And we had wind-driven water coming through the patients' rooms and things like that. So we had to stay on our toes the whole night.
And speaking of which, I'm trying to put myself in the position of a staff member or a patient at the hospital. And on one hand, when you're in a hospital, you feel helpless to begin with. And when you see all that going on around you, I got to imagine that the tensions were pretty high, not just with the staff, but with the patients as well.
Well, everybody did a great job of making sure everybody stayed safe, patients and staff. So that was the big focus. People are nervous and the adrenaline is flowing, and everybody wants to make sure everybody's safe and staying away from areas where they, potentially could have anything coming through any of the holes that we had in the roof. So really it was tense, but people did a great job. The focus on patient safety is always there, and the staff was very great about working together. We had to move equipment out of the rain, not in the rain, but out where water was flowing through, replug things where you had emergency outlets. So everybody was also pretty busy keeping everything secure.
Right, and during a time like that, you're no longer a nurse, an administrator, a pharmacist. You do whatever needs to be done at that time. So, if you have to pick up a broom or mop and sweep up water, throw blankets on the floor, you just do whatever you have to do at that moment. And when you've been in healthcare, especially for a long time, especially when you've been working in a clinical area, you've been programmed to not worry about yourself. You always put the patient first, and you worry about the patient. So that's what we did in that particular moment. We made sure our patients were safe. They were out of harm's way. And everybody at that place would have thrown themselves on top of the patients to protect them if they would have needed to.
That's fantastic, and not uncommon to hear with so many stories of people caring for others during the storm. And another common theme in the immediate aftermath of the storm, anybody that was here, no running water, no electricity, and no idea of when those things will be restored. Not to mention, you also, to your point, you're taking care of others, but you have to feed yourself. You have to continue to go on. Adrenaline, as we all know, only gets you so far. How do you continue to run? How long did you have to sustain yourself until you were able to get those patients elsewhere? And how did you manage that?
Well, the focus changed swiftly to, okay, now here we are. We have generator issues. We lost our roof covering. The building is compromised. So how do we get our patients out? So the efforts then switched, talking to emergency services. They were able to arrange for transfer of our patients by helicopter with the Coast Guard. We sent our staff. There was no medical personnel in the helicopters, so we had to send the patients with our staff. The ambulance staff was very helpful. They also rode in the helicopters. And I also have to give a shout out to the fire department because they all came and helped us carry those patients down the stairs because, of course, there is no power, so there's no elevators. So the patients had to be carried downstairs. We even had the fire department parking trucks with the lights on the helipad so that they could make sure that it was all clear for the helicopters to come and pick up the patients. And so really was, even to the end, that effort, even after the patients were moved, and it was just the staff there, and by then it was almost daylight. We kept the emergency room staff there just at least till about 3 o'clock, just in case once the brunt of the storm was over, in case somebody was seriously injured, we could maybe assist them till they could get more help. And after 3 o'clock, we just finished shutting it down because we had no power, no water. It was just time to go.
Yeah, and while we were still on emergency power, it was a smaller generator. It only ran certain things, certain lights, certain outlets. And we had patients on ventilators. So one of our big concerns was if we lose that little generator, what's going to happen to those patients? So we had our nurse director on Med Surg. She made a list of people that were there, and we were ready in case we lost power. People were going to go manually ventilate those patients.
And so ultimately, you evacuate patients. You're having to deal with staff, and within the next couple of weeks, staff members that have evacuated are coming back. But now you have a community who is, trying to pick up the pieces. And, one of the things that we're really thankful for is we did not have, during the storm itself, any deaths or any major injuries, which is a miracle in and of itself. But through recovery, that's when you start to see some of those things happen. And so now we have a community that's basically with a completely depleted hospital. Take us through the steps of where, from that point to where we are, today and now as we sit here, and how did we rebuild that infrastructure to get back in place to bring services back to the people?
Well, our staff did an amazing job. I have to say, they left the hospital to go home to they didn't know what. Many of them with homes that were damaged, significantly damaged. But our goal from the beginning was how quickly can we get any kind of medical services available? Because we did have the ambulance service, was the only medical service that was available here. So they did a really good job. We actually had Tad had come in. We tried to see, first of all, what we could do for the clinics to get the clinic open right away. We were very fortunate in that our 2 clinics, LaRose only had minor damage, and the cutoff clinic was undamaged, and also our rehab building was undamaged. So initially it was to get the clinic open so people could have some medical care. And so by the Thursday, after the hurricane, the cutoff clinic was open, and also the pharmacy at the cutoff clinic was open, which is really vital for patients who were, some of them just trying to leave the area and they wanted their medications filled. We had no internet. We were on emergency power. The pharmacy was filling prescriptions by hand, just writing labels. They were taking prescriptions from any of the pharmacies just to help people get their medicine. A lot of them would just come up and say, I just need to get, my home is destroyed. I just need my medicine to go to wherever they were going to. I'll let Tad talk a little bit about the opening of the cutoff clinic.
As Karen said, we were very fortunate that the cutoff clinic sustained no damage whatsoever. I stayed at home during the storm. My wife Buffy and my son Jacob were at the hospital, so I was able to get there the next day about 11 o'clock, and was glad to see that the cutoff clinic was still standing, the hospital was still standing, even though it didn't have a roof. So we started working that day. Karen and I had some discussions about trying to get the clinic open, and we were able to accomplish that on the Thursday following the storm. So about 72 hours after the storm, we brought in as much staff as we could from both the La Rose Clinic and Cutoff Clinic, and operated everybody out of there. The first day we were open, there was no emergency room in the community. We were basically it. So we saw anything from broken legs to broken backs to chainsaw cuts and different things. We actually saw 55 patients the first day, so it was difficult. The second day we saw in the neighborhood of 50 or 60 patients as well, and Lloyd's staff was there helping out, getting antibiotics and blood pressure medicine and all kind of different things like that. The La Rose Clinic stayed closed for about 2 weeks. We had a little bit of water damage there. But in about 2 weeks, we were able to mitigate that out. The biggest problem for us is that we had a temporary generator on the Cutoff Clinic, and it was working, but it was working kind of on one leg. It was only running half the air conditioning system. It was only running parts of what was going on. We had generator failure in multiple locations, and we had no running water, which was a big issue as well, too. We were very thankful to be able to get in touch with Chad Boudreau with Joe Septic Contractors, and they were able to bring us a portable toilet trailer within a couple of days, so we had some bathroom facilities for our patients and staff, because we didn't have running water for 8 days. That's not something you tend to prepare for that as much as you can, but you don't think that you're going to have to go 8 days without running water.
That was the conversation when my wife, who had evacuated with our family and children, was asking me about. And I was like, look, until we get running water, you don't want to be here. And it's one of those things that when you lose, you take it for granted until you lose it. And that's one of those big lessons learned that we all had to go through in the aftermath.
I remember Buffy calling me the morning of the storm, about 7 o'clock. She had gone up there the day before with Jacob. And she told me, she said, why don't you run some water in the bathtub? And put some water in the bathtub. And I was like, it's like an old wives' tale. I'm not gonna do that. And I'm glad I did, because that's the only way we could flush a toilet for several days in the house.
My goodness. And we all, we're all sitting here listening to this story, and we really just, for me, at least for the first week or so, I just had myself to worry about, or we were at an office or working or something. But to think about running water and electricity, to think about that, seeing, an incredible and unthinkable number of patients at a medical facility, and not even having a bathroom. I mean, we all, even today, if we go see a doctor, we know how busy those doctor's offices are, and you combining all the services that you're trying to offer, as many as you can, from a hospital into a doctor's clinic. And, oh, by the way, there's no running water. That's just incredible to think about.
Oh, they had running water. They had running water. It just wasn't coming out of the faucets. It was coming from the top of the hospital.
Right.
Oh, man. And that was, so that was it. That was a burden for so many people trying to, pick up the pieces and get things back together, is that we'd have, more and more rain. I mean, this is the fall in South Louisiana. We're having more and more rainstorms. So people making a little bit of progress, and sometimes it just it got killed by that incoming storm. But ultimately, y'all are back and back, working right now and offering those services to people. So I know that we want to get into what's coming in the future, but let's talk about what services we have right now for the community, and what people kind of give us a little bit of idea of what people can expect when they come to the facility. Y'all are obviously not in the main building right now. Y'all are in the makeshift facility in front.
Correct. And before I move on with that, I want to give a little bit additional credit for the staff. When Tad talks about they were doing x-rays on patients. So, they actually moved the portable x-ray machine, out of the hospital and into the clinic so they could provide that service, since there were no x-ray services available. In the 2 weeks following the hurricane, our maintenance staff moved all the equipment out of our rehab building. So we had recently and fortunately expanded, double the size of our rehab building. So it's a big open gym area. So it lent itself perfectly to becoming our emergency room temporarily. So actually, the staff at the hospital, the maintenance people, the x-ray people, the nursing people, they physically moved the equipment from the emergency room, the beds, the monitors, everything from the emergency room, which was not wet at that time. That area was not, didn't have its roof damaged. They physically moved all that, supplies, everything, to that building and converted it into an emergency room. And it's amazing if you go in, because you think, oh, it's an emergency room. You would never have guessed it was a rehab building. And also, I'd like to thank Energy, who contacted us very shortly after the hurricane and provided us generators for all those buildings, because to have an emergency room, you need to have a backup generator. Also, that was very important. Well, first of all, to get power, but just in case we have any loss of power. And so all that happened, and we were able to open that emergency room 2 weeks after the storm. So that was very helpful for the community to know that they didn't, if there was something really serious, there would be emergency care without having to be flown out. There was a lot of helicopter activity initially because the roads weren't open for the ambulances even to get on the road. So we do currently have the emergency department open. It is a little confusing for patients because when you look at the hospital, it looks like it's fine. That they would know that it's totally gutted inside. So we have signage so people can find it. The emergency room is located at 104 West 134th Street. So it's right behind the Cutoff Clinic, next to the ambulance service building. Right next to it, they have a CT truck, a mobile CT unit, so that patients can have CT scans if needed through the emergency room as an outpatient. And they're open 24 hours a day, staffed with the doctors that we had before and the staff that we had before. Both of our clinics are open. So the Cutoff Clinic is open from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, Monday through Friday, and then from 9 to 3 on Saturdays and Sundays. And those people can just walk in for appointments at those times. The Rose Clinic also is open from 8 to 5 on Monday through Friday. The pharmacies are open. The pharmacy that is located at the Cutoff Clinic is open from 8:30 to 7 and Monday to Friday, and 9 to 3 on Saturdays. And the pharmacy at the Rouses in La Rose is open at the same hours. Our rehab services, since we displaced our rehab services, we were able to get a trailer for them. And they are actually parked in the dialysis parking lot. And they open 8 to 5 Monday through Thursday and Fridays from 8 to noon. Now, it didn't take long for us to realize that is not going to be enough space for what they had before. So we're actually in the process of getting them a second trailer so that they can house additional services there and see more patients, because they are going to be displaced as long as the emergency room is in their building. So patients who need laboratory and x-ray services, they are scattered around our campus. It's all still there, but it's just not in the same place. So patients who need to have any kind of x-ray or lab work can go to the Cutoff Clinic because we do have housing x-ray equipment there. We have lab drawing patients who need blood work done from out of the area. Many times patients came to the hospital to have their doctors from that area ordered stuff for them, and they can have it done. That's still in place. You just now can have your blood drawn at the clinics. So either the Lois Clinic or the Cutoff Clinic to get that done. The one service that we have not brought back yet is our dialysis unit. That building had a lot of roof damage, and it was wet throughout the building, had to be gutted. So we tried to get some temporary trailers for the dialysis unit. It is very specific. It is not, you can't just pull a trailer up and do dialysis. You have special water systems. Actually, had our dialysis unit not been damaged for the first month, we could not even have done dialysis because there wasn't enough water pressure to be able to do that service. But we have trailers ordered, and they will be coming so that we can start those dialysis services. We're planning to do that in May for patients, because it is a hardship for them. They've had to travel. We wanted to thank Bless Your Heart and the Bayou Foundation for making some donations to help those patients with their gas expenses.
That's all those little things is really what's helped people. You talked about the pharmacies reopening, and we're certainly creatures of habit here in this community and tradition. And you think about, patients that have had their prescriptions, for example, at the old K&B, and then it became Rite Aid and then Walgreens. Well, Walgreens isn't there anymore. Like the building's literally gone now. And that was one of the big victims of the hurricane. And so you've been having your prescriptions there for 50 years. Like, you probably don't even know where to start, other than maybe going to your doctor. Is your doctor's office even open? That's the type of challenges. And look, those are just the kind of minor things, so to speak, the blips on the radar of people trying to rebuild their house and, maybe try to get insurance to pay for their car and everything else. But those are all the hardships that people, for our listeners not from here, that's what our people are really facing. So to have people like you all that are from here, that live here, and that, understand the suffering and what people need, that's been a godsend, I think, for the community to see how quickly things get up. Because if somebody had told me, look, Lady of the Sea Hospital is going to lose the roof, I would have said, okay, well, how many months or years before we're back running? And to see that y'all got it back up and running, doing what you can, even seeing 50, 60 patients a day in the immediate aftermath of the storm, was truly heroic for this community, no question.
Thank you.
So that's where we are today. I know that y'all have some things in the works for the main campus. What can people expect to see on the horizon, and how long before can you estimate? I know I understand that's going to be tough to look in a crystal ball, but how long before we see a hospital building working as we're used to?
Well, we have recently gone out for bids for a temporary or interim hospital that we can have till the permanent hospital is rebuilt. We're excited about it because we see things in the works, and it's coming soon. It will be big. It will be about 28,000 square feet. It will house the emergency department. It will house 10 inpatient beds, which is one of the things that we're lacking. Our patients complain that they have to go to other hospitals, or things that they used to come in for outpatient services they're unable to get right now, like a blood transfusion and those kind of things. It'll have full service X-ray, regular imaging rooms, ultrasound, which we currently have right now, MRI, CT will be still with our mobile trucks. We'll get our DEXA scan back, mammography, which has been people have been asking us for. And so that'll be really nice to have it in one central location, because the biggest struggle the community has is locating things, because it's scattered around the campus. So as much as we try to help people and communicate that to them, it's still difficult. So that'll be great for that to happen. We don't anticipate that to be in place till the end of this year. It's a modular building. It has to be constructed and then constructed on site. There has to be a site prep. So that'll all take time. The permanent hospital, our current projection is that we would see the permanent hospital completed, started in early 23 and completed in 25. So they think in a couple, possibly 3 years, 2 to 3 years from now till it would be completed.
Good news. And I know that seems like a long way away, but considering what we faced, and I think everybody listening facing their own hardships, I think that's a reasonable estimate. I think that we can all expect to see, and I think we all would look forward to that.
Let me just mention also about dialysis. So we were waiting for the temporary facility to get here, but we're also in the process of renovating the current building, and that the architects estimate will take about 9 to 11 months. So when you think about how long anything, that seems like such a long time, and then you hear, well, this is a much simpler building that's still going to take, almost a year to renovate. So then it brings it much more in perspective. And I think people in the community are faced with so many challenges in renovating their own properties or getting all that done. So I think that they can appreciate it more. But the staff here at the hospital has always been exceptional, and I found even more flashes of that during what's happened. So regardless of what was going on in their own homes, damage, and their families not here, and people living with each other. I mean, our staff members took other staff members in because their houses were damaged and they couldn't live in them, so they could still come and work. It was painful that we had to lay off staff members after the hurricane, of course, because we all of a sudden had to slash our services periodically. So that's been the hardest part, because I always feel like people always felt at the hospital they were part of a different family, our healthcare family. So, but hopefully they'll all be back soon and we can get them to come back. I can't, like I said, sing praises enough about the staff. Really selfless in doing whatever had to be done. Jobs that were not their jobs to do. Even now, we have probably 30 people housed in a 4-trailer compound with all our essential services. Right after the storm, we were in closets and little exam rooms squished everywhere, trying to get hospital services back up and running. So they've really done a phenomenal job.
Yeah, you always see people's true nature when a disaster happens, and unfortunately, we've had our share of them. So we've seen it all too often with the people we work with. But that's great to hear. All right, well, it's time for our rapid fire round. So now we thank y'all so much for coming in and giving us this update, and hopefully this has really helped inform the community about where the hospital is now, where we're going, and what services they can expect to have at our local location. But right now, we'll have a little fun with you guys before you leave. So you can give us a short answer or expand on it if you like. If you feel the need to explain, it's up to you. So here we go. So we'll start with Miss Karen, and we'll go around the room. What's your go-to order at a down the bayou restaurant?
Fried chicken at the Twist.
Good choice. Lloyd?
I like a fried oyster po' boy, but I'm not going to name where's my favorite place.
My go-to is a bang bang shrimp wrap with onion rings from Jeremy's.
That's a good one, and you just made me hungry. All right, back to Miss Karen. What's your favorite Cajun word or phrase and its meaning? Or how do you use it?
That's a tough one. I'm not sure. Let me pass on that one. I'm stumped.
That's okay.
I was afraid you were going to steal mine. Mine is a radot. And a radot, I guess the basic, most simple definition is just a commotion of some kind.
Yeah.
But you can use that word for so many situations.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with Lloyd. He got me on that one. Radot is a very fitting term for a lot of things we've been going through in the last 6-7 months, whether it's at home or at work or just in the community in general. Radot.
I was going to say, I think a lot of people listening right now agree with you.
I was about to say that pretty much is a description of everything.
All right, this one's much easier. Favorite Snowball flavor?
Tiger blood.
So what we got to tell us, what is Tiger Blood? Can you describe it?
Actually, it's a red Snowball.
We all ordered it, so we all know it's
because
red.
I always liked it. I don't know. My kids always liked it, and then I started ordering Tiger Blood, and I like it.
It's probably 30 years I haven't had a Snowball, but I guess
Come
maybe
on.
just a regular strawberry.
Yeah.
Black cherry. Black cherry is my favorite.
See, Tad knew exactly.
Miss Elaine Snowballs, black cherry. Too.
Oh, there he goes. So shout out to Miss Elaine Snowball stand. All right, this should be an easy one too. For all of y'all, it's probably going to be really easy. Next hurricane, staying or evacuating?
Actually, that's an interesting question, because had we been in our hospital building, I'd say stay, because we've stayed for every storm. I guess it all depends on where we are for when the next hurricane arrives, which I hope is a long time from now.
Me too.
I can honestly tell you, I'm going to assume that the emergency room would be there if we don't have a modular hospital by then.
I don't think the authorities will like hearing it, but it'd be hard pressed for me to leave. It's just too much of a radot to have to come back after you leave, because your roads are closed and I don't know. There's just so many obstacles in your way. So I would be hard pressed to leave.
Yeah, I have to agree. Hurricane Ida was the first hurricane in my healthcare career that I didn't ride out at Lady C. I was at home, and it was a harrowing experience. But I think I'd still stay.
So right now there's a hot topic going on online. So we want to get everybody's take on this: jambalaya or pastalaya?
Jambalaya.
Hands down, jambalaya.
lost a lion.
I had a feeling that's how we were going to turn it. All right. Well, thank y'all so much, Miss Karen, Mr. Lloyd, Mr. Tad. Thank y'all so much for joining us. We've really appreciated all the information that you've passed along, and we hope this really benefits the communities. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. We hope so too.
All right, that'll do it for this episode of the DTB Podcast. Thanks to our producer, Ross Snowball, our executive producers, Jure Gyro and Hillary Crum, and the rest of the Bless Your Heart nonprofit board members, Luke Newman and Chris Brantley. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the DTB Podcast on Facebook, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also get more content by following us on Twitter and TikTok at the DTB Podcast. I'm Brennan Matherne. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.